Hello and good evening. Thank you for tuning into NBC World News. I'm Jack Kilty, reporting to you live from our studio on April 22nd, 2015. Tonight is a special night here at NBC World News because it is my last show. After many years of reporting for NBC World News, I say goodbye and thank you for an incredible journey. Tonight we will look back on the time period of when I first began to broadcast for NBC World News, bringing us back to the stories of the 1960s. We will take a look at Nixon's presidency, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the heartbreaking assassination of JFK. First, let's take a look back at John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev's 14 days in October in 1962 and their negotiations over the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now to remember the 46th presidential election that took place in 1968 between Richard Nixon, Hubert Humphrey, and George Wallace, in which Richard Nixon was named the 46th President of the United States. President Nixon won the close election in electoral votes, receiving 301 out of the total of 538 between the three candidates. The native Californian and his running mate Spiro Agnew promised to do great things to further this amazing country's development. President Nixon's charismatic and powerful approach to the election saw the American people placing their bids in his lap. He promised to bring us together again after this weary time of anti-war and civil rights protests. A sense of peace and happiness would be returning to the city streets, something greatly desired by the American people. Similarly, President Nixon exclaimed that he would find a way to create peace with honor in Vietnam, although not providing the people a clear-cut way in which he is to do so. With this new leadership, the United States was to see a bright future. Clearly, his presidency did not lead to the prosperity he promised in retrospect.
Behind the Bay of Pigs invasion. I know this, and this makes you a pig.
No way was I. After all, where's your evidence? Was there ever any documented U.S. air support for that invasion? I don't think so.
Well, you reap what you sow, Mr. President.
You, sir, should keep those words in mind. I know that you are the puppeteer pulling strings in Cuba. Furthermore, I am well aware that since August, you have been building short and medium range missiles in Cuba.
Niet.
Let me be clear, Mr. Khrushchev. I have surveillance photographs that came into my possession of these medium and intermediate range missile silos.
Ha! I knew you had U-2 surveillance planes. What about your missiles in Turkey?
What missiles?
You, Mr. President, have missiles in Turkey and Eastern Europe. I see no difference, hypothetically speaking.
Well, my Joint Staff advisors have encouraged me to blow up these non-existent missiles in Cuba, and then to invade Cuba. What do you think about that?
Do what you must, Mr. President, but the lives of hundreds of millions of Americans hang in the balance.
Not if I remove your missiles. Until you come to your senses, I must impose a naval quarantine.
You American pig, that quarantine is nothing but a blockade, and that is an open act of aggression, ergo an act of war between our countries.
That is certainly not the way the rest of the Americans see this quarantine. I have their full support.
Who cares about the rest of Americas? They are but your colonies. They are all American pigs.
Well, I'm telling you my country on TV today that any missile launched by Cuba will be considered a missile launched by the Soviet Union, and I will be instructing my Joint Chiefs on staff to go to DEFCON 3 full alert status, especially in Turkey.
Your blockade is an open act of aggression, and all of my ships will continue on course. Prepare yourself, Mr. President. At this point in time, on October 24th and 25th, Khrushchev turned back many of his ships. JFK stopped and searched those Soviet ships that maintained course for Cuba. Those that were found to have no offensive weapons were allowed to proceed on to Cuba.
Mr. Khrushchev, we are on the brink of nuclear war. My U-2 surveillance planes, yes, I do have surveillance planes, show that your missiles are near operational levels. Remove them or suffer the consequences.
Niet.
In the middle of the night on October 26, after this meeting concluded, Khrushchev got a message from Kennedy, reading, "If there is no intention to doom the world to the catastrophe of thermonuclear war, then let us not only relax the forces pulling on the ends of the rope, but let us take measures to untie that knot. We are ready for this. In turn, JFK publicly agreed not to invade Cuba if the Soviet Union removed its missiles from Cuba. Meanwhile, outside of the spotlight, Kennedy sent his brother Robert to negotiate the removal of U.S. missiles from Turkey. The world was saved from annihilation. Two very important positives came back from this game of chess in helping the avenue of diplomacy moving forward. A hotline from JFK's desk to Khrushchev's desk was established henceforth. The two superpowers were motivated to sign the first nuclear test ban treaty.
Although JFK successfully solved the issue at hand, his power and influence was soon ended when a man named Lee Harvey Oswald pulled the trigger on a day that will haunt the minds of many Americans for a long time. Shortly after noon on November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated as he rode in a motorcade through Dealey Plaza in downtown Dallas, Texas. He was shot twice, one being fatal. The prosperity of the United States was now left in the hands of Lyndon Johnson, the vice president at the time. Who knows what JFK could have accomplished in the time he had remaining? We only wish we could know.